Glad you're back with us. Today is the first day that we can all celebrate that we have a new justice on the Supreme Court, and he's going to hear some of his first arguments today as a sitting justice. Doug McKelway from the Fox News Channel, kind enough to give us a few minutes today as he's covering this story. Doug, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So it just so happens that a Missouri case might be one of the first ones Neil Gorsuch has to deal with, right?
That's right. That's coming up later this week on Wednesday, and it's an important test of religious liberties and separation of church and state, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he does when it comes to that. But we have learned something new today about Neil Gorsuch. We learned that he is not withdrawn, not in the mold of Clarence Thomas, not even by the standards of deference that rookie Supreme Court justices will often observe. He took his seat this morning for the first of three oral arguments today at the far right side of the bench as you face forward. The newest justice in his first day of listening to these arguments, he dove right in after less than 15 minutes of argumentation. This particular case that he first heard was a deeply procedural case which looks at the Merit Systems Protection Board and whether it can reject an employee's claim for lack of jurisdiction. But Gorsuch pressed the attorneys from both sides for the better part of 10 minutes. He asked, quote, wouldn't it be a lot easier if we just followed the plain text of the statute? And when one attorney admitted that he tended to agree with the justice on one point, Gorsuch replied with a dry wit, I hope so. And he concluded his questions with, sorry for taking up so much time. Earlier in the day, before the arguments got underway and the justices came out, Chief Justice John Roberts welcomed Gorsuch, wishing him a long and happy career in our common calling. And Gorsuch responded briefly to thank the justices for the warm welcome. But as you mentioned, Mark, the bigger test awaits Gorsuch on Wednesday when the court hears this important case about religious liberty in Missouri. This is the case in which a Missouri church is challenging the state's denial of grant money to resurface their playground there. The state of Missouri contends that its constitution bars state funds from going to churches. We'll see how he rules on that, what kind of questions that he asks, I should say. But one last point, Mark, about Gorsuch. As the newest member of the High Court, he is going to undergo what Justice Elena Kagan calls sort of a mild hazing ritual. This means that he's the lesser among equals. And when the justices have their conferences to decide what cases they're going to put on the docket, behind closed doors, it's just the 9 justices. He will be required, as is tradition, to open the door for anybody who knocks, whether it's clerks or messengers. He will be required to go get coffee for the other justices, and he is also required to be on the committee for the luncheon here, the cafeteria. So if one of the justices' soup is too salty or if their pasta is overcooked, they can deliver their complaint to Neil Gorsuch, and he is required as a member of the cafeteria committee to see that it is amended.
How long does his hazing last? Does he get out of that?
Until a new, younger justice or newer justice comes on board. In the case of Elena Kagan, this lasted for 6 years, but she didn't set the record. That would go to Justice Breyer, who served in that role for 11 years. And so apparently we've heard stories that he even reflexively gets up behind these closed-door meetings to answer the door because he's been doing it for so long.
He was so used to it. That's right. Funny. That's funny. So somebody had mentioned that there was a possibility that Gorsuch might have to recuse himself from one of these first hearings. I guess that wasn't the case? Had you heard that?
That's right. That's because one of the attorneys who was arguing the case spoke at his confirmation, spoke in glowing terms at his confirmation hearing, and even called him a friend of Gorsuch. I have been told by some longtime court observers that is not grounds for recusal. We'll see whether or not he does that, but I don't think it meets the standard for recusal.
Yeah, very good. I tell you what, Doug McKelway, I appreciate that report, a little bit of insight on what's going on at the Supreme Court today. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Yep, you have a great day. Appreciate that. Doug McKelway from the Fox News Channel. He was in those, he listened to those arguments this morning there in the Supreme Court. Just want to get a little insight onto that. This first case that we were talking about, remember this? We talked about this on the show back when it first got appealed to the Supreme Court. So the Trinity Lutheran Church, which is over in the middle of the state, had applied for a grant from the state, some grant money that was made available to schools to redo their playground, like put some rubberized treatment on their playgrounds so the kids wouldn't fall and get hurt. And they were actually granted that money initially. And then folks started pushing back on it because they felt like somehow it crossed the line of the separation of church and state because federal monies were going to a private school, even though it had nothing to do with education or the endorsement of the Lutheran Church or anything like that. It was simply grant money that was available to do school improvements, in this case on a playground. And the school's been fighting for this because they think it's kind of ridiculous. It's not the state endorsing the religion if it was able to get this grant. Now, here's the catch. The challenge to this, of course, came under Jay Nixon and a different attorney general, Chris Koster. And now we have Josh Hawley, and, of course, we have a new governor. And apparently Governor Greitens has made an announcement about this, and the change in administration, the change in party at the top of those two positions might have the court reconsidering whether or not they will even hear this case, because the state may be backing off of this, whereas before they, for political reasons, were being pushed to pursue it. So if we get more details in on that, I'll let you know, but just to give you an idea. And one of the other petitions that Neil Gorsuch is going to hear, one of the first ones, is a gun rights case from California. And they're also what they're starting to look at are cases they may consider taking up next year. Like when this court session ends, I can't swear to this, I think it's in June sometime. They will start, between now and then, they're going to look at which cases they might accept for next year. There's a gun rights case. There's a religious liberty versus gay rights case from Colorado. And those are some of the arguments that they'll be listening to decide if they're going to take these cases next year. So look for more information to come out on that in the next few days. I'm sure that they'll probably deliberate on that, and then they'll make those decisions before the end of the term. I didn't get to this in the last segment when I was talking about the tax protests, but I could care less if Sarah Silverman even existed or not. I pay zero attention to Sarah Silverman. I'm not even sure what she's ever